Well, our North Country history lesson today extends beyond the North Country.
Emily Griffin talks about the history of Groundhog Day.
Every February 2nd, several men in top hats pluck a fat little rodent from his hut to determine how long winter will persist. Groundhog Day has been around in the U.S. since 1886, first recorded in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, where the largest annual celebration is held. But long before Punxsutawney Phil, there was Candlemas, a Christian festival which was also held on February 2nd. If the weather was clear that day, festival goers would declare a longer winter ahead. It's also midway between the winter solstice and spring equinox, and traditionally, ancient people would look to animals emerging from hibernation to indicate the weather. The Americanized version of Groundhog Day had a nameless hog for many years. It was in 1961 that the weather forecasting animal was dubbed Phil, presumably for Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. Some recordings show how passionate Phil is about his forecasting, like in 1914 when he saw his shadow and demonstrated a groundhog flop. Or in 1954 when he saw his shadow and went completely white with worry. There's no doubt that the annual celebrations bring a lot of fun to Punxsutawney, but do they also bring accuracy? Researchers suggest no. The Farmer's Almanac says Phil is 50% accurate. The National Geographic Society estimates a 28% accuracy, and the National Centers for Environmental Information places Phil at about a 40% accuracy. Only time will tell if this year's prediction comes true. Emily Griffin, 7 News.